Most men do not fall in love by immediately expressing emotion with clarity and openness. In the beginning, many of them become observers rather than confessors. They start studying the emotional atmosphere around the woman they are drawn to, because attraction alone is not enough for them to feel safe. A man may desire a woman strongly, but love introduces emotional risk, and risk activates caution. This is why emotional safety becomes one of the first unconscious tests he creates. He wants to know whether being vulnerable around you will strengthen him or emotionally expose him in ways he cannot control. This testing rarely looks dramatic. Often it appears through small moments. He may reveal a personal insecurity indirectly and watch how you respond. He may admit failure in a joking tone just to see whether you respect him less afterward. Sometimes he becomes temporarily distant, not because he has stopped caring, but because he is measuring whether the connection feels peaceful or emotionally demanding. Men are deeply affected by emotional pressure even when they pretend otherwise. If every moment with a woman feels unpredictable, chaotic, or full of hidden tension, he begins associating love with psychological danger rather than emotional refuge. Emotional safety means he can exist without constantly defending himself. It means he does not feel judged for weakness, mocked for vulnerability, or manipulated through emotion. Many men have spent years hiding softer parts of themselves behind control, humor, logic, or silence. So when they encounter someone who allows them to relax emotionally without fear of humiliation, attachment deepens rapidly beneath the surface. Ironically, the woman who creates this safety is usually not trying to control the outcome at all. Her calmness communicates trust, her emotional stability communicates maturity, and her ability to remain grounded during uncertain moments silently answers the question he is too afraid to ask directly. If I give you my real self, will you use it against me? Silence becomes one of the most misunderstood behaviors in men when they begin falling in love. Many women interpret distance, pauses, or reduced communication as loss of interest, but often a man's silence is connected to emotional processing rather than emotional absence. Men are conditioned to internalize feelings before expressing them. When emotions become intense, many withdraw inward, not outward. They become quieter because they are attempting to understand the depth of what they feel without losing control over themselves. A man in love may suddenly create space after moments of closeness because intimacy awakens vulnerability. The connection starts feeling real, and with reality comes fear. Fear of rejection, fear of dependency, fear of emotional exposure. Silence then becomes a protective mechanism. He unconsciously steps back to observe both himself and the relationship. He wants to know whether the connection remains emotionally stable without constant reassurance or pressure. Sometimes his silence is also a test of emotional energy. He watches whether a woman immediately reacts with panic, accusations, or desperation the moment communication shifts. This is not always calculated manipulation. Often it is instinctive behavior driven by uncertainty. He wants to feel that love can exist without emotional chaos attached to it. If every quiet moment turns into conflict, he associates emotional closeness with exhaustion instead of peace. There is another layer beneath this silence that many people never notice. Men often struggle to articulate emotional complexity in real time. While women may process emotions through conversation, many men process emotions privately first. Silence gives them space to organize feelings they do not yet fully understand themselves. The deeper the attachment becomes, the more serious this internal process can feel. This is why a man who is falling deeply may sometimes become quieter instead of more expressive at first. His mind is adjusting to the reality that someone now affects him emotionally in ways he cannot easily control. Behind the silence, he is often measuring trust, emotional safety, and the terrifying possibility that his heart is no longer entirely his own. When a man begins falling in love, he often pays far more attention to consistency than to charm, beauty, or temporary emotional intensity. Attraction may capture his attention quickly, but consistency determines whether his emotional walls slowly come down. Many men have experienced situations where words sounded comforting in the moment, but actions eventually contradicted them. Because of this, a man in love starts observing patterns instead of isolated moments. He watches whether your behavior remains stable across time, stress, distance, and uncertainty. Consistency gives him psychological security. It tells him that the connection is real rather than emotional performance. A woman who behaves warmly one day and coldly the next without reason can unconsciously activate distrust inside him. He begins feeling emotionally unsafe because he cannot predict the emotional environment around her. Men often crave peace more deeply than they openly admit. Emotional steadiness creates a feeling that the relationship is grounded in reality instead of emotional turbulence. This observation happens quietly. He notices whether you keep your word in small situations. He notices whether your energy changes when attention is no longer immediate. He notices how you behave during conflict, disappointment, or misunderstanding. Many men become deeply attached to women who remain emotionally composed under pressure because stability signals maturity and loyalty. It communicates that affection is not dependent on constant validation or control. A man in love may even test this consistency unconsciously. He may become briefly less available just to observe whether your treatment of him changes completely. He may share vulnerable information and remember how you responded weeks later. Men rarely forget emotional reactions that made them feel respected or emotionally exposed. What seems insignificant to a woman can become deeply important in his internal emotional memory. Consistency also allows him to relax the masculine mask he constantly maintains around the world. Most men spend years feeling that they must always perform strength, confidence, and certainty. But when someone's behavior becomes predictably sincere and emotionally balanced, he slowly stops guarding himself so intensely. His trust deepens because consistency removes the fear that love will suddenly transform into emotional instability, rejection, manipulation, or psychological unpredictability. When a man begins falling deeply in love, he may unconsciously provoke emotional reactions to understand the emotional structure of the woman he is attached to. This behavior is rarely about cruelty or manipulation in the beginning. More often, it is rooted in uncertainty, fear, and the desire to understand whether the relationship feels emotionally safe and stable. A man who is emotionally invested starts paying attention not only to how a woman behaves when things feel good, but also to how she responds under emotional tension. He may challenge opinions during conversation, become slightly distant, delay replies, or say something emotionally ambiguous just to observe the reaction it creates. What he is often studying is emotional stability. He wants to know whether disagreement immediately turns into chaos, whether silence creates panic, or whether emotional pressure causes respect to disappear. These moments reveal more to him than romantic words ever could, because reactions under tension expose the deeper emotional patterns a person normally hides. Many men are taught from an early age to suppress vulnerability and maintain control over emotions. Because of this conditioning, they become highly sensitive to emotional volatility in relationships. If every uncomfortable moment leads to emotional explosions, guilt, manipulation, or instability, he subconsciously associates love with danger rather than peace. Even strong attraction can begin weakening under constant emotional unpredictability. At the same time, these tests are also connected to his hidden vulnerability. A man in love often fears emotional domination without admitting it openly. he fears becoming emotionally dependent on someone who may later weaponize his feelings against him, so he unconsciously creates situations that reveal character. He watches whether a woman remains centered or becomes destructive when emotionally triggered. Ironically, the reactions that impress him most are usually calm ones. Emotional maturity affects men deeply because it creates a sense of safety they rarely experience. A woman who can communicate honestly without losing control often becomes unforgettable in his mind. Her composure signals strength rather than weakness. It shows that her emotions are real, but not ruled by impulsiveness, and this emotional steadiness quietly increases his trust, attachment, and emotional surrender over time. When a man begins to develop deeper emotional attachment, his vulnerability rarely appears in direct or obvious ways. Instead of openly expressing sensitive feelings, he often reveals them indirectly through humor, teasing, sarcasm, or seemingly casual conversations. This is not because he is dishonest, but because emotional exposure feels risky for many men who have been conditioned to associate vulnerability with weakness or loss of control. So instead of saying something like, "This is how I truly feel," he disguises emotional truth in lighter forms that protect him from rejection or embarrassment. Jokes often become a safe doorway into emotional honesty. A man might make playful comments about missing you, caring about you, or even fearing losing you, but he wraps it in humor so that if the response is negative or indifferent, he can retreat without feeling exposed. This creates emotional safety while still allowing him to express what he is feeling internally. What looks like casual joking is often emotional testing at a softer level, where he is trying to measure how his feelings will be received. Sarcasm can also carry emotional weight. A comment that appears playful on the surface may contain a hidden truth underneath. It allows him to express intensity without fully revealing himself. Similarly, sudden, deep conversations late at night or during quiet moments often appear out of nowhere, but they usually come from emotional buildup that he has been holding internally for some time. In those moments, his defenses are lower and truth slips through more naturally. Withdrawal is another indirect expression of vulnerability. When emotions feel overwhelming, instead of speaking about them, he may pull back temporarily to regain emotional control. This silence is not always detachment. Sometimes it is emotional regulation. These indirect expressions reveal a core truth about masculine emotional behavior. Many men do not lack feeling. They lack safe language for expressing it directly. So their vulnerability appears in fragments rather than full confession. Understanding this pattern requires observing not only what is said, but how and when it is said, because emotional truth is often hidden inside behavior that seems ordinary on the surface. When a man falls deeply in love, one of the most subtle but powerful shifts in his perception is whether he feels seen beyond his surface identity. Many men spend a large part of their lives operating through roles such as being strong, capable, composed, or emotionally controlled. These roles become a kind of mask that helps them function in society, relationships, and responsibilities. Over time, this mask becomes so habitual that even they forget how much of their true emotional self is hidden underneath it. So when a man becomes emotionally attached, a quiet internal question begins to form. Does she see me, or only the version I present to the world? This is not always a conscious thought, but it influences his behavior deeply. He begins to notice whether the woman he is connected to responds only to his achievements, confidence, and composed behavior, or whether she also recognizes his moments of hesitation, confusion, or emotional vulnerability without judgment. Seeing the man beneath the mask means recognizing emotional layers that are not immediately visible. It is the ability to sense when his silence is not emptiness, but thoughtfulness. It is noticing when his humor is covering something deeper. It is understanding when his withdrawal is not rejection, but internal processing. A man feels profoundly impacted when someone does not reduce him to a single personality trait, but instead perceives him as emotionally complex. This kind of perception creates a rare form of emotional safety. Many men are not accustomed to being emotionally understood without having to explain themselves constantly. In everyday life, they are often valued for what they do rather than how they feel. So when a woman responds to both his strength and his hidden softness without criticism or exploitation, something significant shifts inside him. He begins to relax the constant need to perform. He feels less pressure to maintain perfection, and gradually, emotional honesty becomes more possible, because being seen beneath the mask does not mean being exposed or judged. It means being accepted in a way that allows the mask to become unnecessary in moments of trust. When a man starts falling in love in a deeper, more serious way, one of the strongest internal experiences he goes through is a quiet fear that accompanies the attraction itself. This fear is not always logical or openly acknowledged, but it is deeply rooted in emotional psychology and life experience. Love begins to feel less like a simple feeling and more like a situation where he is no longer fully in control of himself. That shift is what creates inner tension. Deep attraction does not just create desire, it creates emotional dependency on another person's presence, response, and perception. For many men, this feels unfamiliar and slightly destabilizing. They are often used to being self-contained, emotionally independent, or at least appearing that way. When someone starts affecting their mood, thoughts, or sense of stability, it triggers an awareness that something inside them is becoming attached in a way that cannot be easily reversed. At the same time, love introduces the possibility of rejection, loss, or emotional disappointment. Even if nothing negative is happening in reality, the mind begins projecting potential outcomes. This creates an internal conflict where one part of him wants closeness and emotional connection, while another part begins resisting it to protect his sense of control and identity. This is why emotional behavior may sometimes appear inconsistent or confusing during early stages of deep attachment. There is also a fear related to identity. Many men build their self-worth around independence, strength, and emotional control. When love begins to matter deeply, it challenges that identity. Suddenly, another person's opinion, presence, or emotional response starts holding significant weight. This can feel like a loss of internal authority over oneself, even if the relationship is positive. Because of this, emotional reactions become more complex. He may become more attentive at times and distant at others, not because feelings are unclear, but because the intensity of those feelings is difficult to fully process. The deeper the emotional connection becomes, the more the mind tries to balance attachment with self-protection, resulting in internal tension that is often mistaken for confusion or inconsistency. True love tests in men are rarely deliberate strategies or conscious games. They are more accurately understood as emotional reflexes shaped by psychology, upbringing, and past relational experiences. When a man begins to feel something genuine and meaningful, his mind does not immediately shift into openness. Instead, it moves into a state of evaluation, not of the other person's worth in a superficial sense, but of emotional safety, stability, and long-term psychological impact. These tests emerge because intimacy activates both desire and fear at the same time. On one side, there is attraction, attachment, and emotional pull. On the other, there is the instinct to protect oneself from potential emotional harm. The human mind is designed to reduce uncertainty, and when feelings become intense, uncertainty increases. So instead of expressing vulnerability directly, the mind creates indirect ways of checking whether it is safe to proceed deeper. Past emotional experiences play a major role here. If a man has previously experienced rejection, emotional inconsistency, or betrayal, his nervous system becomes more alert in new attachments. Even without conscious memory, emotional patterns remain stored. So when he starts caring deeply about someone again, his behavior may reflect caution rather than pure openness. This can appear as withdrawal, hesitation, or subtle emotional distance, even when interest is strong. At the same time, societal conditioning reinforces emotional restraint. Many men are taught not to appear overly dependent or emotionally exposed. Because of this, when love begins to feel real, they may unconsciously test how much emotional space they are allowed to occupy without losing respect or autonomy. These tests are not planned actions, but emotional responses to internal tension. Another important aspect is the desire for certainty in an uncertain emotional space. Love does not come with guarantees, so the mind seeks patterns that suggest stability. Emotional reactions, consistency, and responses to vulnerability become indicators of whether the connection feels safe or risky. Ultimately, what appears as testing is often the mind trying to reconcile deep attachment with self-protection, gradually learning whether it can fully trust without losing emotional balance or identity. When emotional safety becomes the foundation of a connection, the dynamic between two people shifts from pursuit to presence. Many relationships are built on chasing, attention, reassurance, validation, but emotional safety removes that urgency. It creates a space where neither person feels the need to constantly prove, chase, or secure the other's feelings. Instead, there is a quiet stability where connection is assumed rather than constantly questioned. In this state, a man no longer feels compelled to test the relationship through emotional push and pull because his internal uncertainty begins to dissolve. When he senses that his emotional expression will not be punished, mocked, or used against him, his defensive patterns start weakening. The nervous system, which was previously scanning for threat or rejection, begins to relax. This relaxation is what allows genuine emotional presence to emerge. Without emotional safety, attachment often turns into anxiety-driven behavior. People may overthink, overanalyze, or attempt to control outcomes because they are unconsciously trying to reduce emotional instability. But when safety is present, the need for control decreases. Instead of reacting to fear, he starts responding to trust. Instead of withdrawing to protect himself, he stays present because presence no longer feels dangerous. Emotional safety also changes communication patterns. Conversations become less about proving a point and more about understanding each other. Silence is no longer interpreted as abandonment, and distance is no longer immediately assumed to be rejection. This shift reduces emotional reactivity and creates a more grounded form of connection where both individuals can exist without constant emotional tension. Another important aspect is that emotional safety allows authenticity to surface. People stop performing ideal versions of themselves and start showing more honest emotional states. A man does not feel pressured to appear constantly strong or perfectly composed. He can be uncertain, reflective, or even emotionally exposed without fearing loss of respect. When a man meets someone who resonates deeply with him, this attachment begins forming quietly. However, the opposing force is equally strong. Masculine identity is often built around independence, emotional resilience, and self-sufficiency. Anything that threatens this identity can trigger internal resistance, even if the emotional experience itself is positive. This is why love can feel mentally exhausting in its early stages. The mind tries to balance two competing needs, to connect and to remain emotionally protected. This creates cycles of approach and withdrawal, clarity and confusion, intensity and silence. These cycles are not always intentional. They are the result of psychological adjustment to emotional vulnerability. The war is essentially the negotiation between emotional surrender and psychological defense. If emotional intensity increases too quickly without a sense of safety, the defensive side becomes stronger. If trust builds gradually and stability is experienced consistently, the resistance slowly weakens. Over time, when trust outweighs fear, the internal conflict begins to resolve. The man no longer feels he has to choose between love and identity, because both can exist without one destroying the other. When a man becomes emotionally attached, one of the most subtle and often overlooked behaviors is the way he observes rather than speaks. This observation is not passive in the sense of disinterest. Instead, it is an active internal process where he is trying to understand emotional reality beyond words. Many men rely on observation because verbal expression alone does not feel sufficient to measure emotional truth. Actions, timing, tone, consistency, and reactions become far more informative than statements. This tendency comes from the way emotional trust is built in masculine psychology. Instead of immediately verbalizing feelings, a man often gathers information internally first. He watches how a woman responds in different emotional states, how she handles uncertainty, how she treats moments of silence, and how she reacts when expectations are not met. These observations help him build an internal model of emotional reliability. What makes this behavior significant is that it is rarely obvious. While a woman may think nothing is happening in moments of quiet or distance, internally a man may be processing a large amount of emotional data. He is not only observing behavior, but also interpreting emotional patterns over time. This includes noticing whether someone remains stable during conflict, whether affection is consistent or conditional, and whether emotional reactions feel grounded or impulsive. Observation also allows him to maintain emotional control. Expressing feelings too early can create vulnerability before trust is fully established, so observation becomes a protective mechanism. It gives him space to feel without exposing those feelings prematurely. In this phase, he is often emotionally involved but externally reserved. At a deeper level, this behavior reflects a desire for certainty in an uncertain emotional environment. By watching instead of speaking, he attempts to reduce emotional risk. He is essentially asking silent questions through attention. Is this connection stable? Is this person emotionally safe? Can I trust what I am feeling without it being disrupted? Over time, if observations consistently align with emotional safety and trust, internal resistance decreases, and emotional expression becomes more natural and less guarded. When a man develops genuine emotional attachment, one of the most defining internal struggles is the fear that emotional closeness might come at the cost of personal identity. Many men build their sense of self around independence, self-control, and emotional stability. These traits are not just preferences, they become part of how they define their worth in the world. So when love begins to feel real, it does not only create connection, it also introduces a subtle threat to that internal structure. The fear is not always about losing freedom in a literal sense. It is more about losing emotional self-possession. A man may begin to notice that someone's presence affects his thoughts, decisions, and emotional state more than he expected. This realization can feel destabilizing because it challenges the idea that he is fully self-contained. Emotional dependency, even in small amounts, can feel unfamiliar or uncomfortable if he is used to relying only on himself. At the same time, society often reinforces the idea that men should remain strong, composed, and unaffected by emotional intensity. This conditioning makes vulnerability feel like a risk rather than a natural part of intimacy. So when love deepens, There is an internal negotiation between staying emotionally open and maintaining the identity he has built over time. This is why some men may unconsciously create distance when they feel too emotionally exposed. It is not necessarily rejection, it is often self-protection. By stepping back temporarily, they try to regain emotional balance and reaffirm their sense of independence. During this phase, emotional intensity is not denied, but it is carefully managed. Another important layer is the fear of being changed by love in a way that feels irreversible. A man may worry that once he fully lets go emotionally, he will no longer recognize himself in the same way. This fear is less about the other person and more about internal transformation. Over time, if trust and emotional safety grow, this fear gradually weakens. The man begins to understand that identity does not have to be lost in love. It can evolve within it without disappearing.